All right, here we are at 7.1, equation of a circle. So this is an equation, and it makes a circle. All right, enough said. So here we have H, we have K, and we have R. And the definition for an H and K, an ordered pair, that is the center of a circle. So if we had a circle, something like this, the center of the circle, that the location of that would be H comma K. And the radius of a circle is R. So from the center of a circle to the line, the outside of a circle, that is your radius. Okay? So looking at that, let's look at one of these problems. It says identify the center and radius of each equation. Now remember, anytime we take something out of these parentheses, it will switch its sign. Okay? When you plug stuff in, you don't have to worry about switching signs because this negative on both of these will automatically switch the sign for you. Okay? So let's just look at this problem. All right? So first off, we want to find out what the center is, and then we want to find out what the radius is. Okay, so for the center, these are our H and this is our K, but when we take it out, anything in parentheses changes its sign when you take it out. So we need to switch this sign to -10, and our K will go from a +5 to a -5. Right? So that's where those will switch signs. That's where those numbers are coming from. And if we look at those numbers, so this -10, if we were to put that into our equation for H, it would switch that sign back and make that -10 become a +10. Okay, so when you plug stuff into this equation for the standard form of a circle, you don't need to worry about switching signs. It will already do it for you, okay? But when you take things out, you need to switch those signs, okay? So that when you plug that back in, if you did plug it back in, it would go back to the original sign that you needed, okay? So let's do some more examples. First, we have the radius. Sometimes you may say, ooh, the radius is 25. Okay, but it's important to realize that over here at the top right corner, that is the radius squared. So if we want to find out what the radius is, we will take the square root of 25, and the radius will be 5. Okay, so let's do some more examples. Here we go, our center. We'll just switch the signs of what's inside these parentheses, -9, -1. And the radius will be the square root of 16, which is 4. Right? I would suggest pausing at this point and trying to do C, D, E, and F. I'll give you a second to do that. And now you're back. Okay, awesome. Thank you for pausing and doing these problems. Okay, so our center here will be 14, -8. And our radius will be the square root of 15. Now you may say, well, that's not a perfect square. And you're right, it's not. And you can leave it at that. If you needed to graph it, like say I gave you this equation and you needed to graph it, and you didn't know what you'd do for your radius, is you would just plug that into your graphing calculator, or just your calculator, square root of 15, and that would give you 3.87 approximately, okay? Your little approximate sign. All right, so if you needed to graph that, then that's what you would do, and that would be your radius. Just approximating what the square root of 15 is. Okay, and we'll do some of those. All right, next, our center here would be -12 and 6, and our radius is the square root of 13, and you can't simplify that, so you're just good with that. E, we do center will be 2, 3, and our radius is the square root of 1. And what is the square root of 1? Well, 1 times 1 is 1, so the square root of 1 will just be 1. All right. Next, for F, center will be 4 and 12, or sorry, negative 13. I was thinking of something else. Okay, and then our radius will be the square root of 5. All right, so hopefully that was pretty easy for you guys, and we'll have something like that on the homework. Next, it says for number 2, find the center and radius of each circle pictured. Then write the equation of the circle in standard form. Okay, so make sure we're doing circle in standard form, not just standard form. All right, first, the center. All right, right here, center. It's always going to be an ordered pair, an x and a y. Here is our center, so it will be 0, 3. Our radius is what you from the center to the circle. So this would be 1. So you're going from 0 to 1. That is your radius. Okay? But you don't need to write it like that. Okay? So radius is 1. And then to plug that into your equation, just a reminder, that's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So for when we have our center is h comma k. And these h and k, I mean, you could come up with any other letter. If that confuses you with the h and k for our vertex form, you're welcome to switch that and be a different letter, anything, okay? Or, yeah, so feel free. Okay, anyway, so we plug this in, we'll plug that in. Maybe I'll change my color. So we plug that in, we plug that in, and then we plug that in. So we'll get x minus 0 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals the radius squared. Then you want to simplify. We'll get x squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 1. And that would be your answer. Okay? So, in a nutshell, we are marking down where our center is, our radius, and then we just plug that information into our the equation of a circle, and then we just simplify it. Okay? Here we have a bigger circle. Our center is going to be -1, 2, because this is -1 would be our x, and 2 would be our y. Okay, and our radius will be how far it is from your center over to your circle. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then we're going to plug that into our equation. X minus a -1 gives us a +1, plus y minus 2 squared equals 4 squared. Okay, and if you just want to skip that part and just say the 4 squared is 16, then you would be done with your problem. But I'll never say, oh, you showed too much work. So please show as much work as you can. All right, so I'm going to go and do these ones really quick. If you want, pause them and see if you can do them right by yourself. Okay, otherwise you can just keep watching. All right, our center is 3, 4. Our radius is 2. Plug this in, we get x minus 3 squared plus 4, or not 4, y minus 4 squared. That is a 4. 4 squared equals 2 squared, which is 4. That would be your answer. Next problem, our center is 1, 0. Radius equals 5. So we plug that in, we'll end up getting x minus 1 squared plus y minus 0, which is just y. So we could do y squared equals 5 squared, so 25. R squared is 25. Okay, so I skipped a little bit. So when you're doing your homework and your tests and things like that, try and show as much work as possible so I can give you as many points as I can. All right, next our problem says identify the center and radius, so the same thing we've done before for each circle, and then sketch the graph. All right, so here we look for our center. Since we don't have a parenthesis with something in it, that means that our h and our k are going to be 0. So we'll end up just saying our center is 0, 0, and our radius is the square root of 36 equals 6. So I'll put a point for our center, and then we'll make points that are 6 units away in all directions, okay? So you'll do something like that. You're welcome to use a compass if you have a compass. If not, just freehand and do your best to try and make it look like a circle, okay? Something like that, and that would be full points. All right, so next one, if you feel like you've got this so far, just pause it and see what you can do by yourself. I'll just keep going on. All right, so here we've got the center is 3, because remember when you take something out of a parenthesis, it switches the sign, -2. Okay, we didn't have to worry about switching the signs when we pulled it out the parenthesis because we didn't have a parenthesis. Okay, here we have our radius is going to be the square root of 4, which is 2. So now we plug in our center point, which is 3, -2. And then our radius is 2 in all directions. And then we make our circle. Okay? Not too bad. Most people did this pretty quick in class. Did I miss anything? Oh yeah, there's one more. Sorry, I'm going all over the place. Okay, we have some more. We have, here we have our center is -4, 4. So -4, 4 is right there. And our radius is the square root of 1, which is 1. So we put these points and we make our circle. Okay, next one we have the center is -3, 0. Again, if we don't have a parenthesis, that's like y minus 0 squared or something like that. So all you do is write a 0. Okay, so we have our center is at -3, 0. And then our radius equals the square root of 10. And I kind of told you this before. If you have a square root of 10 and it can't be simplified really easily, you will just plug that into your calculator and it will give you 3.16227766 forever, okay? But we're just going to estimate when we are drawing these circles. Okay, so you'd go maybe 3.16 or 3.4 or 3.2, just a little past 3 in all 4 directions. And then we will draw our circles. Okay, I think I already mentioned if you have a compass, you're welcome to use that. Also, a straight edge will be helpful in our next unit. Okay, so now it says write the equation of a circle given the center, so we have a center, and a point on the center. Okay, and this process is very similar to finding the a value of a quadratic from unit 6.2. Okay, in 6.2 we had something like, given the vertex, I guess I don't need to draw that, the vertex and a point, we were able to plug in y equals a x minus h squared plus k, and we were able to plug in for our vertex, we plug in h and k, and we plugged in for our point a y and an x, and so all we had left we needed to solve for was a. Okay, and then once we had a, then we would plug that into our equation and it would be done. So this is very similar, but not as many steps. So here we have our center. We already know how to plug in our center. So x plus 2, because we switch the sign when we plug it in, squared, and then we have plus y minus a negative 3 gives us a positive 3 squared equals r squared, because they don't give us what the radius is, but we are going to solve for it, because this is going to be our x, this point on the circle will give us our x and y. So we plug those in, we'll get 15 plus 2 squared plus 2 plus 3 squared equals the radius squared. You can plug this straight into your calculator, or you can simplify it. Like here you'd get 17 squared plus 5 squared equals r squared, and then 17 squared is 289 plus 25 equals r squared, and 289 plus 25 is 314. So now we know what the radius squared is. All we would need to do is to substitute that in for r squared. Okay? So your final answer would be x plus 2, which is the same right here, squared, plus y plus 3 squared, which is the same what we had there, equals 314. And that will be your answer. Okay? So from the rest of these, I'm just going to do it by plugging in this into my calculator to find my answer. It'll go a little faster, but I do prefer if you can have this step first and then this step, not combining them all together. Okay? And I'll tell you why when I do this next problem. So we plug this in, we'll get x minus 1 squared plus y minus 0 squared equals the radius squared. And then we plug in our x and our y, gives us 10 minus 1 squared plus 15 minus 0 is just 15 squared equals the radius squared. Okay, and then I would just plug that into my calculator, or you can simplify it, and you end up getting 306. And all you need to do is take 306 and replace it for the r squared in this equation. And that's why I have it in 2 steps, is because it's easier to remember what you need to plug in. Okay? And do that either way. I need to have you show some sort of work. Okay? So here we go. Your final answer would be x minus 1 squared plus, or I guess we would need to have parentheses, just y squared equals 306. I've had people ask, do I need to take the square root of 306, this part or this part, when you're doing that problem? You don't need to take the square root of those, because all we need to solve for is the radius squared. We don't need to know what the radius is to do the equation. Okay? You could solve for r. Here you'd get r equals the square root of 314, but then you would still need to plug that in for your r over here, and then you would still take the square of it. So you'd be back where you were before. So that's why we don't need to take the square root. We don't need to solve for the radius. All right, next problem. X plus 12 squared plus y minus 11 squared equals the radius squared. Then we plug in negative 17 plus 12 minus 11 squared equals the radius squared. All right, you can plug that in your calculator, or that would be the same thing as negative 5 squared plus 1 squared. That gives you 25 plus 1 equals the radius squared, which is 26. Okay, and you would just take that, replace it for the r squared. X plus 12 squared plus y minus 11 squared equals 26. All right, so one thing I wanted to mention, I probably should have done this before. I guess I can do it with this one. It's just kind of far. All right, let's give this one a shot, okay? So I'm not asking you to do this. I just want you to understand where this equation is coming from. Okay, so say this was, this is our graph, okay, and they give us the center. It's at 14 and negative 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so we have a point somewhere. Best I can is something like that, okay? So that would be our center. And then they give us a point that's on the circle. So that's at 12 and negative 13. So 12 would be like down here, and negative 13, maybe something like this, okay? I know it's just kind of guessing more or less where stuff is, but okay, so this is our point on our circle. And the thing is that the center to any point that's on the circle, that is always your radius. Okay? All right? So, when you think about that, we have our center that is at 14 and the other is at 12. Anyways, you can take this and make that be a triangle. Okay? And when we do our equation, we have x minus h squared plus y minus h, or k, squared equals the radius squared. Well, the difference between this line, where this point is, and where this line is, that is x minus h. So that is the length of this triangle, the base of that triangle, and the height of the triangle is y minus k. All right? And if you have those lengths, and we want to find out the length of the radius, do you remember the Pythagorean Theorem? Okay, I can't even remember how to spell it, but the Pythagorean Theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, this h minus k could be our a, y minus k could be our b, and our radius could be c. So when we do that, we are taking x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals our radius squared. Okay, so it's the Pythagorean Theorem, which is kind of cool. So if you couldn't remember how to remember what the equation is for a circle, you can just remember it's the Pythagorean Theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay? Which is kind of cool. I think that's kind of cool. All right? All right, so to do this problem is we would do the same thing we've done before, x minus 14 squared plus y minus a negative 10 gives us a positive 10 squared equals the radius squared. Plug these in. And then we simplify. So we get the radius squared is 13. All right? And then we would just plug that right in here to our equation, and we get x minus 14 squared plus y plus 10 squared equals 13. Okay? So there will be problems. Pretty much all of these problems will be on your test, and hopefully you can get these ones really easy. But just realize that if it's easy, make sure you double check. It'll be easier to make mistakes if you don't double check. All right, E, looks like I already have that written down. You'll have one like this, perhaps on the test, where they will give you the center and the radius, and all you would need to do is plug it in. Okay, so this would be like 6 squared, which is the same thing as 36. Okay, and you'd want to simplify that. So this one would be x minus 5 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 81. Okay? All right, that's everything. The homework is very similar, and you can probably get that done within, for sure, probably in 30 minutes or less. Okay? So good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.